Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's Sunday evening. This is Steph Gaudreau, and I just want to know if you can hear me. So we've got our chat going. So if you can hear and see me okay, and you're watching the live chat, and we should probably tell you, hey, our video is started. Go ahead. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for letting us know. Z is working the chat again, and so this is a true team effort. And so I'm just going to take a moment and make sure that all of our settings are good to go. I think it looks like we're good. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in on your Sunday evening and spending a little bit of time with me. And I'd love to hear what you loved about the summit, and we'll do that toward the end of this talk tonight. But I'm going to spend probably about a total of an hour tonight with you. And the topic of my talk tonight is how to live a life you really, 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 really love. How do you start putting all of this stuff that you learned into effect in your life and taking action on so many of the really valuable lessons that you learned from our summit speakers and all of the sort of aha moments and revelations that you had about your own life while you were participating in this past week's summit. So I'm still sort of catching my feet. Today was a bit of a slower day because we only had 2 talks going up. But wow, it's been an absolutely super exciting week. And I'm just so grateful that you tuned in and you participated and you're here tonight. So I see, just looking at the chat, who's here. Julie, thank you for being here. Joni, Caroline, and we have somebody else from Canada tonight as well. Marge. Okay, awesome. Jill, I know Corinne was on as well. Corinne all the way from New Zealand. And so hopefully more folks will hop on as we get going. But again, so thankful that you're here tonight. And I'm just going to sort of flip back to my screen so I can see myself, and I know we're still live. Last time we did this, we had a bit of an internet problem, but I think we've sorted all of that out. So we're going to get through that tonight, and everything is going to be A-okay in terms of the technology. So tonight, when I was sitting down thinking about what did I really want to do to recap everything in the summit, it was kind of hard because there were so many powerful themes. So we had 6 days of themes with mindset to kick it off. And then we had movement, we had nourishment, women's health, empowerment, and tribe. And so that's a pretty broad range of topics, and so many different things were covered by our expert speakers. So I didn't want to really rehash everything that they were saying, but I really wanted to bring you something that was sort of new and some of sort of the best lessons that I could give you going forward, because it's one thing to have listened this week and feel super motivated to either do something in your life, take action on something, or just put something into play that you learned, and then the event's over and life as usual kind of picks up. And sometimes it gets a bit challenging to remember what it is that you learned, or how to really not get overwhelmed with the details, but take the core messages away that apply to you and put those into action in your own life. So I'm going to talk about that tonight. And at the end, probably in the last 15 minutes or so, I would love to open it up to questions from you all that I can answer related to what I'm going to talk about tonight, or related to overall themes that you tuned into for the summit. So that's what we're going to do this evening. And I've got actually 4 things that I'm going to share with you tonight and teach you sort of 4 main bullet points about how to live a life you really, really love. And this is stuff that I've picked up in my own reading and working with clients and just in my own life experience. So I'm not necessarily a guru when it comes to any of this, but this is all stuff that's really stuck for me in my life and has made an impact, and also with the folks that I've had the good fortune to work with in terms of coaching clients or athletes in the gym and stuff like that. So this has been field tested on a lot of people, so you can have the confidence in that. So at the end, we'll take Q&A, and then at the very, very end, I have a surprise that I'm going to tell you about that I'm really excited about, that I have not told anybody yet. So I haven't told anyone. You're going to hear it if you're on tonight's broadcast. So I'll tell you about that later on. It's going to be good. All right. So how to live a life you really, really love. I feel like this is the $1 million question that so many people ask, and everybody's on the search to be happier and to find more from life and to get more out of life. And I think there's a pretty interesting blog post out there that talks about it was a palliative care nurse, so essentially hospice, who went around and asked her clients, or asked the people who were in her sort of end of life care, what are the things that you regret the most from your life? And a lot of them said things like, I worked too much and I didn't spend enough time with my family. I didn't spend enough time relaxing, or I didn't spend enough time pursuing the things that were important to me and fulfilling to me and that I really loved. So I think this is related to sort of one of those this is like a big question, how to live a life you really, really love. And the catch to all of this is it's going to look different for every single person. And I think we get in these circumstances where we would love to have an answer, have a prescription that applies to everyone. And I could say, just take one part of this and 2 parts of that and combine it this often and wait for this long, and you're going to get said result. And that's just not how it works. We know that. Like, we know that at our core, that that's not the way life is going to work, and that we are all very different. And the things that we value, the things that we want to do with our lives, the things that happen to us, the things that come into our responsibility are going to vary. So the long and the short answer is it depends. And if you've ever done any coaching with me, that's almost always my answer. We have these broad brush strokes that we can paint and say, hey, this works for a lot of people. But when it comes down to it, it's all about what works for you and your life. And so a lot of you probably know me from Stupid Easy Paleo. And so I get a lot of people who listen to the summit who come from there, and they are into that lifestyle. And then I get other people from social media and Instagram who are like, I don't do paleo. It doesn't work for me, or it's not what I want to do, or I don't lift weights. And I'm like, you know what? At the end of the day, doing what matters to you and what you like and what you love and what you can sustain is what's really, truly important. So I'm not going to have an answer here that's going to be 1 part of this and 2 parts of that, mix it for this long, and then bake it for this long, and you're going to have a wonderful life ever, because things are going to happen and it's not that easy. But I do have some pretty great suggestions for helping you to get to that point, and some other thoughts. And so the interesting part of this is a women's strength summit. And so a lot of women and people maybe guys listened into, a lot of people probably think, well, I just have to be literally the strongest, most, like, I just have to be able to stand no matter what. And I think it's interesting to talk about the difference between strength and resilience. So that resilience is what I mean when I say harder to kill. So if you know me from the Harder to Kill challenge or from the Harder to Kill radio podcast, I use harder to kill as sort of a funny, like not so serious way of saying resilient, because you can think of like a very strong piece of iron. Think of an I-beam, right? It's meant to bear the weight of what's around it. It's meant to stand no matter what. One aspect of strength. But when it comes to resilience, I think this is where we sort of miss the mark. Now, the thing is, like, resilience doesn't sound as fun or as sexy or being harder to kill. But resilience means, can you come back from things that are difficult? Can you bend instead of break? Can you mold? Can you flow? Can you be flexible with life? And I think that's really a key that we oftentimes miss, at least in the health and fitness world, is we try to get people to just maintain a very strict regimen, right? And I say we, think of all the bloggers you follow and the websites you go to and that sort of stuff. And they're like, okay, if you could just eat exactly these foods, you're going to be good to go. You're going to lose all that weight. You're going to feel better. You're going to get the body that you want. Everyone's going to love you. Life's going to be happy. And so you follow the prescription for a while, and then life happens. Your kid throws up on you in the morning, and you have to you're late for work and so you skip breakfast, or your car breaks down, or something tragic happens, or you lose your job, or you find out you have an autoimmune illness. I mean, it ranges from the minor to the very serious, but life happens. And all of a sudden, the very strict rules that we were following, we just have to put our time and attention in other places. And those other things tend to fall apart. Then we get into that cycle of guilt and shame. And then we're trying to get back on track. So what I mean by strength sometimes is being rigid. The best way to build that resilient capacity. So strength is important. And I'm obsessed with using the example of Trivial Pursuit, the board game, where you have different categories of the pie and you have to fill up your pie to be the winner. And I think too often we focus on those single pieces, or we think, okay, if I could just nail my diet, like if I could just get all my macros perfect, my life's going to be fantastic. And that approach may work for a short period of time, and then life happens and we can't follow it, and then things fall apart. So I'm more interested in helping you realize that your strength oftentimes comes from the ability to be flexible, to weather the very tough times that happen to you. And Kristen Beamer, who is one of our speakers on day one, said it very, very well, which is like, life is not happening to me, it's happening for me. If you think about the most resilient people you know, these are the people who have undergone extreme challenges. They've weathered very difficult times. Maybe even good stuff happens to them, but it's still very big. Think about the people that you know who are also pretty well adjusted and they're still thriving despite those challenges. I think that's really, if we sort of think about living a life we love, that's kind of what I envision, at least, as a resilient person, is the ability to go through the really hard times and still come out the other side and say, what have I learned about myself from this? And how have I grown as a person? So it sounds easy when you're on the outside looking in, but really the most resilient people that you know are usually not the ones who have had it the easiest. They're the ones who have had life challenges, who have made them who they are. And I'm sure if we asked all of you to share something here in the chat that was a moment where you overcame something that was very challenging, it's oftentimes those moments of overcoming the challenges that are the most gratifying. So when, going back to that original story that I talked about the nurse who was asking her patients, what are your largest regrets? I'm sure many of them would not have said, I wished for a challenge-free life, because it's through overcoming those challenges that we determine and we discover who we are. So I just wanted to mention sort of the distinction between strength and resilience, and how that frames the discussion sort of going forward. All right, we've got a couple of other folks jumping on. Audrey, hey Audrey. We have somebody from Arlington, Texas. Z is manning the chat, as you can see. Regina, hello, thank you so much. All right, sweet. So now I'm going to share with you 4 tips. These are 4 sort of helpful strategies that I have for building a life that you really, really love, for living a life that you're just like, life is good. I'm happy with where I'm at. I feel a sense of deep joy, to quote a great lady named Lulu Wu. Have deep joy with life. So the first is to focus on the basics. And when I say that, I mean, don't underestimate the power of the basics. So many of us we're just on this journey to try to overhaul so many things about our lives. And oftentimes that can lead us down the path of getting very overwhelmed with the details. Like, I should be drinking this specific drink every day, but I can't get the ingredients. They're very difficult to obtain. Or I'm supposed to be, I should be going to a gym that's this type of training, but it takes me 45 minutes to drive there each way every day, and it just doesn't really fit in my schedule. I need to have fancy whatever equipment, fancy things in my kitchen. I need to do it all. and I need to have all the details sorted out. And what tends to happen, what I see a lot as a coach, and this is as a holistic nutrition practitioner and as a weightlifting coach, what I see a lot is that folks are so focused on the minutia that they miss the big needle movers. To sort of give a hat tip there to Jill Coleman, she talks about sort of the big knob and then the small knobs, like the coarse adjustment and then the fine adjustment. And so a lot of my clients oftentimes miss the big needle movers. And what I mean by that is their sleep is not so great. They're eating lots of junk food. This is no judgment, by the way, because I've been there as well. You all know the story. My afternoon snack used to be Coke Zero and M&Ms. So I was basically living on sugar. But, are we getting decent sleep? Are we eating primarily a nutritious diet and at least sort of minimizing junk food? Are we moving our bodies in some way? And again, that doesn't mean I have to join the most elite CrossFit gym and go 5 times a week, but am I getting some basic movement in my day most days? And am I getting out and getting some sunshine? I think if we can say we're doing those basics, those are going to move the needle quite a bit more than some of the really micro things that I see a lot in our community. And there are lots of biohackers. So I'm talking about like biohacking stuff primarily, but biohackers and people that are like, if you just buy my $75 a month product on subscription and you take that like my supplement, you're going to figure it all out, right? So do you have the basics kind of covered? And this goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you know anything about psychology and Maslow, we need those basics at the bottom of that pyramid to really support the stuff on the top, right? Nutrition's the same way. And actually for me, sleep comes before trying to get super nerdy and dialed in with all my nutrition, like really nerdy analytical stuff. So, are we just eating primarily real whole foods? It doesn't necessarily need to be paleo, but are we eating real whole foods and sort of minimizing the processed foods and junk food? Huge needle mover right there. Are we getting some protein in all of our meals? Huge needle mover right there, especially when we're talking about hormones and satiety and appetite. Are we trying to go to bed sort of with the sun? And I mean, it's going to vary on the time of year, but for us and for most people, that means kind of getting in bed around 10 and getting up around 6-ish. All right. Your situation will vary. But are we sort of following the natural patterns of our circadian rhythms? Are we getting some movement, right? Just baseline movement. Are we walking where we could take a car, or are we riding a bike where we could take a bus or drive somewhere? Are we getting up and moving our body and taking a break throughout our workday? Huge needle mover, right? Are we getting outside and getting some fresh air and sunlight? I mean, it sounds so old fashioned. It sounds like I sound like my grandmother, get outside, you kids. That's what we did, right? Get outside, get some fresh air, get some sunlight. That has a couple of different things. First, it helps to synchronize our circadian rhythm, which is super important in maintaining overall health. It helps to synchronize and normalize our cortisol and our melatonin. So many different things are related to photo period and getting, even if it's not sunny, right? Even if you're like, I can't expose all my skin and get some vitamin D, depending on the time of year and the latitude you live at, you still, on most days, even if it's cloudy, are going to get more light outside than you would indoors. So go for a 10-minute walk, right? These are all little things, but it's the little things that are oftentimes the biggest needle movers. So that's tip number 1. Take care of the basics first. I know sometimes we get really focused on trying to do it all, and then the stress of trying to do it all actually undoes the positive benefit that we're trying to get from those things. All right, so number 2. This is going to go a little bit higher level. We're kind of going higher and higher level here. My second tip for living a life that you really, really love is to get clear about your values and your purpose. In other words, who are you above everything else? What's important to you? And the key is that this stuff can change over time. So what was important to you when you were 20 might not be what you value now as a 40-year-old. Does that make sense? Hopefully. So I'm going to give you some examples here of how that plays out. And so I'm curious to know, just put in the chat, you can just put a yes or a no. Have you ever done any kind of values assessment, like core values assessment, personal values, intrinsic or extrinsic values? You may have done this through your workplace. Maybe you did it through a coaching program. My Harder to Kill Challenge people have done this. That's part of what they do as a values assessment, like a values inventory. So I know Marge has done it, Julie. I'm curious to know, has anybody else? Awesome. Yeah. I did. Hey, Brenda, what's going on? I've done this with actually, I did the same values inventory that I have in the Harder to Kill Challenge with a corporate group a couple months ago, and they just could not believe how much clarity it brought them in. It's so simple. So I'll walk you through how to do this. And I can probably put up a link in a little bit. Don't you know, although sounds interesting. Cool. So I'm going to describe what it is. Awesome. So many of you have done that, which is great. And if you've done it before, I really recommend that you go back and you do this maybe once a year, once every 2 years, just to make sure you're sort of on the right track. So basically a values inventory is where you think about how important a certain value is to you. You think about how much time or energy you currently spend on that thing, and you see where there's a gap. So you can rank them on an order of 1 through 10, and then you just subtract the two values. Obviously, if it's a negative, you just take away the negative sign. But the idea is the larger the gap, the more that's an area where I'm probably not feeling fulfilled in my life. And if I only have so much time and energy in a day, I want to maybe devote a little bit more of that effort to the things that are going to make the biggest impact. So I'll give you an example. One value is family, right? So if family on a scale of 1 to 10 is a 10 in importance for me, right? So I'm going to rank that. But my current assessment of how much time and energy I'm spending with my family right now is about a 7. Then I can see that the gap is about 3. Now, if for another value, and I'll list some of these values, if for another value, which is being fit or feeling fit, if that's, say, an 8 for me in terms of importance, and I spend, like an 8 in terms of time and energy, and this is all very subjective, which is why it's up to you, the gap there would be 8 minus 8, which was 0. So for me, like, I don't necessarily need to put a ton more time and energy into fixing or addressing that value in my life. Like, I'm kind of good. It's important to me and I'm doing it, right? That's kind of how this works. So if you have instances where something's very important to you and how much time and energy you're spending on that is very little, it's likely that that's an area of your life where you feel dissatisfied, or you feel like something's missing or something's not right. You get a gut feeling like something needs to be worked on. So here I'll list out for you some of these others. And then after we're done here on the live video, because this is truly live, I will go back and put the link on this page so you can have it. So other values could be things like work and career, money and finances, significant other or spouse, children and family, as I mentioned, diet or nutrition, health in general. And you could break that down to sort of, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, if you wanted, creativity and self-expression, learning and self-development, which is one of the things you're doing here, right? Service or social contribution, spirituality, fun, adventure, travel, right? So you can see these are all different things that you could list out as values. And so basically you just sort of find where there's a big gap. And that's what you would maybe put some time and effort into first. So this can help you sort of prioritize almost, if you will. And this is almost a little bit related to what I'm going to talk about in number 3. I'm just going to check in on the comments here really quickly. Okay, great. We'll post the link later. Sweet. Good. I will do that. All right. So step number 3, or tip number 3 for building a life and living a life you really, really love. And if you're just joining us, we said focus on the basics was number 1, and think about your values. Number 3, be an editor. Be an editor of your life. I really like this approach, and I'll explain what it means. And this comes from a book called Essentialism. And it's a very good book. It's a pretty easy read, but it's a way to start sort of trimming away what's less important to you because we only have so much time in the day. So this is kind of an offshoot of number 2. But being an editor means, and if any of you do editing in a professional context, you're constantly shaping by trimming, or even in some cases adding or making substitutions, just to keep it simple. So to be an editor would mean to cut away things that are not important. I'm thinking of my own writing here. I tend to be quite a verbose writer at times. So my goal is always to trim it down to the bare essentials and still get my point across. So what I mean is, I'm a really big fan in a lot of cases of a switching approach, like a substituting approach to things in life. For example, if you're just starting off with healthier eating, instead of just saying, screw this, I'm going to go cold turkey and my family's going to be miserable, but hey, we're going to do this anyway. And then we have vacation coming up and you've got lots and lots of variables. Let's say, how about we swap out one thing for another? And we gradually make these swaps. Megan Blacksmith talked about this in her detox session, where, if you're thinking about, oh my gosh, I have to replace everything in my house that could be toxic. She's like, no. When you finish one product, research and replace it with maybe a better option, right? So I really like this idea of swapping things out, if you will. But that being said, a lot of times we actually need to cut things out of our lives that are taking up too much of our time. They are non-essential. They are not related to what's important to us. And we are devoting a lot of mental energy to them as well. And so it's not necessarily a priority list. It's a way of looking at your life and saying, maybe I need to work on saying no more often. I know as women, this is something we often struggle with because we want to keep everybody happy. And sometimes saying no or saying yes to everything adds a lot of stress to our plate. So when I say be an editor of your life, I want you to think about, are there, and it could be something simple as, I went through my bank statement around tax time. I actually went through my PayPal statement first. I went through my PayPal sort of statement every month, and I looked for things that I wasn't using. And you can find this if you have a PayPal account. Look for subscriptions. You can find this. You might be paying for things that you are not even using now, right? Simple life edit. You're going to cut away that which you are not using. So you can start with the financial aspect because that's always a win, right? You're always like, yes, now I've got extra free money every month. That's amazing. So start with something that's a little bit less painful, like cutting off subscriptions that you don't use, or, deciding that you're going to, cut off a service if it's not a subscription, something like that. From there, you can work your way up. Once you get more comfortable, you can work your way up to saying no to actual people, which can be a little bit harder, especially depending on the person. So if it's a person that you want to say no to, right, I always recommend, if you're not sure, then wait and ask, can I get back to you on this tomorrow? Or I'd like to get back. Don't even phrase it as a question if that's uncomfortable to you, because you're like, I don't know what they're going to say. Just say, I'd like to get back to you on this in 24 hours. That gives you time to think. Because so many times we're very reactionary. We want to say, like, yes, just say yes, just to get somebody off our back. That can put us in a situation then where we have to cancel later on, or we have to make up a reason why we can't do it. And that further adds to the stress of the situation. So I like that particular line, and it's true. It's like, hey, can I have 24 hours to think about it? Fine. Another one that I use quite often is, I don't have space for that. And, there is an aspect of this to setting boundaries that's important as well. So by setting these boundaries, you're also protecting what's most important to you. And that's probably related to, if you go back here to the values sort of inventory, is what's the thing that's the most important to me? And I can't make more hours appear in the day, like the day's 24 hours long, but how can I free up a little bit more space in my own schedule? All right, so that's tip number 3, is to be an editor and start trimming away that which you do not use or is not important to you. And number 4, now this is one of my favorite ones, is to practice gratitude. It sounds kind of woo and like, really, does it do anything? But practicing gratitude, and it is a practice. You actually have to work at it a little bit. You have to work it like a muscle. If I want my muscles to get stronger, I need to actually work at that. I can't just lie on the couch 24/7 and go, oh, why am I not getting any stronger? I don't know, right? So I have to practice that gratitude. But gratitude is a really interesting practice to do because the more you do it, and this can be very simple things. It doesn't necessarily have to be you're making some kind of huge financial contribution to something, but gratitude is more of an internal practice. It's a way to tune yourself to being present to what's going on, right? Because if you think about an old school radio dial, I know they're digital these days. You just push a button. An old school radio dial, you had to sort of turn the dial and then you'd lock into the station and it was clear. And then you click off or sort of like rotate off the station, dial off the station, is static. So we have a lot of static going on right now. What happened in the past, what's going to happen in the future. There's lots and lots of static going on in our mind. And the key is, can we get tuned into what's going on right now? And when we can do that and get present, we can start thinking about what we have right now. And there are infinitely small things that we can be grateful for. Now, the thing is with gratitude is a lot of people are like, nothing good ever happens in my life. And social media is definitely a contributor to this, where we're like, look at everybody else. All these great things are happening. Well, sorry, camera got a little fuzzy there. All these great things are happening to other people. Nothing good ever happens to me. My life sucks. I'm sure we've all had this internal monologue before. I know I sure have. When we can stop and get tuned into the good things that we have right now, we build a sense of gratitude and contentment and joy. The great things in life are oftentimes not the most exciting. And sure, exciting things do happen. We win a prize, we go on a big vacation, we get a new car, we land a promotion at work. The guy or the girl said yes. I mean, we do have these super, we have a child is born, whatever it is. Like, we have these super, like, we've been anticipating this moment for so long and it's finally here. And isn't this exciting? We have those. But I think social media really, especially, gives us this illusion that everyone else around us is having all of these amazing moments and we're not. And what's wrong with us? So I really challenge you to start getting tuned into the areas in your life right now that you're grateful for. And they can be the smaller, and here's a secret, the smaller they are, and I mean like the more mundane they are, the better. Because you start to tune and sort of flex the gratitude muscle so that you can see it at any time. So when you're having that bad day, you're like, you know what, right now, I'm here with my husband. We have this wonderful apartment or house that we live in. I'm fed. I'm here with all of you. And we just had this wonderful event this week. Somebody held a door for me. Somebody gave me a compliment. I took a micro action on something that I've wanted to do for a really long time. It's the really small stuff that if we get in tune to it, we start to see that life, even in the moment, even when bad things are happening all around us, life can still have good things. And so the secret really to living a life you really, really love is to learn how to find gratitude and happiness and contentment. Contentment's a much different feeling than happiness even. We can cultivate those feelings. We can make those feelings happen when we stop, even in the midst of chaotic things, and we say, okay, what do I have right now that's good? What do I have right now that gives me contentment? What do I have right now that means I'm safe? What do I have right now that means I'm loved, right? And so that's really the key. It's nothing that's like, I wish I could just say, again, like, follow this prescription, you're going to find it. It's more getting in tune and getting present to what you have right now in this very moment. That's going to make a big difference for you, even when bad stuff's going on. I'm looking through these comments. So one of the great things you can do for gratitude, and it's going to depend on you and what you like to do, but one of the things that I used to do, and I don't do it as often anymore, and I really, sometimes I want to get back to it and I just forget because sometimes I read at night instead. When I was going through a particularly hard time, I would sit down every night and I would write down 5 things that I was grateful for. And I challenged myself to make them kind of things that like anybody else wouldn't, like, that's not super exciting. Like, I had the best cup of coffee this morning. Like that was something I would write down. Or, a student who I didn't think would do this turned in an assignment early. I was like, gosh, I was so grateful for that. That was awesome because, it showed that point got across. Or it could be really anything, but sit down. Some people do it in the morning, along with other morning practices that they like yoga, or just sort of lying quietly and getting in touch with their breathing, or sitting by themselves and enjoying a cup of coffee on the stairs outside, or whatever it is. So that's a particularly common one that people will often do. This could be a prayer practice. It could be some kind of other practice where you talk with somebody else. I used to have, I did a thing with one of my friends, Trish, where we'd call each other every morning and just say like 5 things we were grateful for, or 3 things we were grateful for. And it was awesome because I got to actually talk with her instead of just texting, and hear her voice and connect that way. So it could really take any form that you like. One of my other favorite ones, honestly, is random acts of kindness. Even anonymous random acts of kindness. You would not imagine, cannot believe how good it feels to do a random act of kindness on somebody. Like, we have no expectation of reciprocation at all. So it could be, one of the things I used to do that was totally free is I got a bunch of greeting cards they were blank inside. And I just wrote little notes, little encouraging notes. And they were obviously general, but they were like, you know what? You're an awesome person. You've been doing great things. I hope you have an awesome day. And then whatever else. Like, I would just write little notes and I would take them. And I got this idea from somebody else. It's not my idea, but I would like put them under somebody's windshield wiper in the parking lot. I would put them, or I'd put them everywhere I went. And I never stuck around to see if somebody found, like at the coffee shop, I would leave them at the coffee shop. I never stuck around to see if anybody even found them. But it felt so great to just do that. Or a sincere compliment to a stranger. I've seen so many things online now where people just start up random conversations with strangers. They'll just give them a compliment. Maybe it doesn't always go well, because sometimes people are like, why is somebody being nice to me and talking to me? But I think more often than not, you'll get a positive response. So just a simple, nice compliment to somebody, what you feel magnified in yourself is really cool. So we also had somebody else in my challenge who, she's very artistic, and they went and sort of like painted these rocks. I can't even explain it, but painted rocks with these like cool little motivational sayings this is for the CrossFit Open. And they sort of like left them around the park. I don't know. It was super cool. And they did it because it made them feel great. Yes, that idea. Yeah, right. It was awesome. So there are so many different ways to do this. I mean, obviously doing charity work, doing volunteer work is something that qualifies as well. But however this shows up for you in your life, I think so many times we get very focused on self. We're like, what's wrong with us? We need to change. We need to fix ourselves. And it's great to want to improve. But I think sometimes we get a little too focused on here and not as much on helping other people. And so it's a balance, obviously. Depends on you as a person. I think sometimes if we can look outside of ourselves a little bit, then honestly, sometimes our problems seem pretty small when we compare it to other things that we see around us or other ways that people are really struggling. So those are my 4 tips for you, and I'll review them very quickly. Focus on basics and the things that are going to be the big dial movers. So sleep, eating just eating good solid food, moving and getting some sunshine are really important. Connection with people you love is another important one. Think about your values and where there's gap between what's important to you and how much time and energy you're putting into that. And Z's amazing. Z is the best support ever. He's recapping all of this. 3, be an editor of your life. So start trimming some things away. You're going to have to make some choices, especially if you're feeling very overworked, you're feeling very busy, or very much in the hustle. Start cutting some things away. That's just one of the hard things that you're going to have to do, but start with easier things first and build up that confidence to start saying things like saying no to things that aren't important to you, and protecting your time and your boundaries. And then the 4th one is to flex your gratitude like a muscle and find a gratitude practice that works for you in your life. So those are the 4 things that I have for you tonight about how to build a life that you really, really love. And I'd love to know now if you all have questions. Should I do questions and tell them what the surprise is? Okay. So if you have questions, type them in the chat box. And while we're waiting for that, I'm going to tell you about the surprise, because I've teased you long enough. And you've been here and so amazing. All right. So the surprise is that later this summer, toward the end of the summer, I'm going to be reopening my 12-week strength school mindset coaching program. So I'm really excited for that. There are currently no signups. You can't sign up for it anywhere. We're not enrolling anybody. I'm just sharing that with you, is that strength school is going to be coming back. We did it last year. It only comes around once a year because it's a 12-week, very sort of intimate group of very personal coaching, and it's all about mindset stuff. So 12 weeks, it's going to happen. We'll roll out more information as the summer goes on. But if this is something you're thinking like, I want to get into this stuff more, like more of the stuff that we talked about on this particular chat tonight, if this stuff appeals to you and you're like, I want some like coaching around this, I want somebody to help me sort through some of this in my life, then that's what I'm here for that program. So, and that, by the way, is 12 weeks of, we get on the phone every week and we talk about it. So it's a very sort of small, intimate group, which is really cool. So that's going to be coming up later this summer. And I wanted to tell you now so you had the heads up. And it's going to be really fun. Yay. So does anybody have questions about anything that we talked about on the chat? Any of the main themes? Just a comment. I find these items have become easier since I retired. Now I truly understand why you shouldn't wait to be happy. Thanks, Marge. I love that comment. You know, do you have any sense of why it's become easier now that you're retired? Is it just that you have more energy to think about stuff like that? Maybe you can give us some insight there. And I love that you're here, Marge, because you have that life experience that a lot of us don't have quite yet, which is really awesome. Any questions anybody has about any of the themes? Any of the themes from the summit, anything that you've listened to that you want clarification on? It's all about you now. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how, it's interesting to try to strike that balance. Brenda, hey Brenda, you're at school at UCSD. Yay. It takes so much energy and I don't enjoy what I do, but I feel that I'm so far now and have no choice but to keep going. How do I continue to find what I really love, having to do something I don't love to do that much? Oh, that's such a good question. Yes, such a good question. So let me address that in a couple different ways. First, I think there's a huge push, pressure, if you will, from social media or from family or from friends or from just what we see of the world. And we think, well, to be strong means that we have to pursue and persevere and keep going no matter what. And there is grit. If you're interested in the term grit, there's all sorts of writing on grit and what it takes to keep pushing through difficult times. But I think sometimes, at least I have done this, Audrey, I'll get to your question in a minute. I see it. So hang on. Sometimes I think what we tend to do is think if I leave something that I'm doing now or I change my mind, I'm going to be or a loser or weak. And I think we need to change that dialogue. And I say we just collectively, because there is a certain point where stopping or changing direction even is a better choice for the individual because of financial reasons, because of stress, because of emotional reasons, because of whatever. Right. So it's impossible for me to look at your situation and say, yeah, you should definitely pack it in, like definitely quit, or no, you should definitely keep going. And you're going to hear lots of people in your life give you motivation to keep going, right? They want to encourage you. But there is an aspect of strength that is realizing when it's time to pivot, when it's time to move on, when it's time to do something new. And, I really, if I had to, and I won't put you on the spot, Brenda, but I want you to think about, like, if in your gut feeling and your gut reaction is like, what it is, what your gut is telling you is like yes or no. I also like this one from Marie Forleo. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. You know, and then there's one other thing that's very interesting. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. Sunk cost fallacy. What it basically means is I've stayed in it this long. If I leave now, like I should just stay in. I've stayed in this long. And perceiving that if we leave the situation, we're going to lose everything we invested. I don't know if that makes sense. And you can Google it and look it up to read more about that. And I'll type it in the chat box here. Sunk cost fallacy. So in other words, that would be something like, well, I only have a year left to go. I've already done 3 years. I should just suck it up. I'm not here to tell you what the right or wrong answer is, but those could be some things that you use to help you make that decision. Read a book called Finding Your Own North Star by Martha Beck. Thanks, Joni. That sounds awesome. I hope that answered your question, Brenda. It's a tough one, but I can relate. I've had, you're in your last year. Again, it might be worth it for you to finish. It might be the better idea to not. I think Allegra put it really well when she said there are no wrong answers. So Allegra Stein was the very first talk of the summit. And she said, there are no wrong answers. You're just going to take a path. And, the interesting thing is, like, for school related stuff too, you can go back. Or you could just finish and then move on and do something totally different. I did that. I've got a bachelor's in biology and a master's in education. And I don't teach anymore. Although I do teach in different ways. I just don't teach in a classroom. But, I had this big fear that if I left education, I was like, but I invested in a master's degree. Like, I'm going to throw all that away? Well, it turns out that you learn a lot more throughout education than just what the piece of paper says. So a lot of the things that I do now, right, I still go back and I use what I learned in getting a degree. So I think, school is one of those where sometimes we think it's permanent and we have to stay in. We can always go back. So there are those options for you as well. I'm working on education, and that was my fear. Yeah. I think you have to sort of, that it's worthwhile to talk to the people that you really trust in your life and see what they think as well. But ultimately, your gut probably already knows the right answer. And if it doesn't, that's okay. You don't have to know the answer right now. Right? And Allegra talked about that as well. All right, you're going to go back to Audrey's question. I've been working on editing things and saying no, and I love the time this has opened up in life. Do you have suggestions on how to deal with folks who are shocked? Sorry. When I don't join in the typical I'm so busy and stressed and tired dialogue. That's an interesting one because misery loves company, right? Everybody's like, I'm so busy and tired and stressed, and I want everybody else around me to feel busy and tired and stressed and miserable. It's jarring. Sometimes you're right when you're like, I'm not going to buy into that. And Okay, sorry, one sec. I'll get you the link thing in a minute. I don't have it right now off the top of my head. So we're going to put that link to the PDF that I mentioned about the values thing. We'll put it on the page here, not in the chat comments, but we'll put a link on the page, like underneath the button, or sorry, underneath the video. So getting back to that question, you are going to surprise people if you're just like, yeah, like I don't want to be busy because everybody the mainstream wants you to be busy. If you saw Pilar Gerasimo's talk, she talked a little bit about this. And if you're interested, you can look up her stuff with Healthy Deviance, Audrey. So Pilar Gerasimo and Healthy Deviance. And she sort of talks about this idea that when you decide to opt out, then you are going to get people who look at you a little bit funny sometimes. They don't understand where you're coming from, or worse, that you are trying to be superior to them. You have to know and take this like you have to, and this has to get soaked into your cells and your understanding. That is their problem, not yours. How they choose to look at it is that's their stuff, right? So if they're upset or taken aback or like, oh, what's wrong with you? It's a judgment that's coming from them and their insecurity about the whole thing. So, I find it best in those situations to just politely diffuse and exit the conversation. I think the more you try to convince people that your way is the right way, even if you're doing it very low key, and you're not trying to be accusatory and hurt feelings, engaging in that dialogue with somebody who's just not ready to understand or even listen is going to be very draining on your part. And there's actually a term for that, which I can never remember, as basically that in order to defend your position is going to take way more time and energy on your part than the initial interlude that the two of you had. So you just sort of politely diffuse and either leave the situation or change the subject. Like, you don't owe anybody a big, long explanation. And I think a lot of times people really don't want that because it's just going to set them on the defensive. I hope that answered your question. Ramona, this past Friday, you were 60. Oh, happy birthday. Still don't know my purpose, but maybe it doesn't have to be one thing. Maybe using the values and time evaluation will make me feel better. Yeah, you know what, Ramona? It's challenging to sort of take your purpose and distill it down into a sentence. If I could recommend something for you to look at, I would recommend Simon Sinek. Start with Why. It's a book, but he also has a sort of like an online mini course. It takes a couple of hours to complete. And, that could be helpful. But I think sort of thinking about what's most important to you. And if you look back on your life and you think, what do I tend to do the most for people? Or how do I tend to show up in the world? That's probably related to your purpose. And it doesn't have to be something that's very, very, very specific. The purpose that I have alluded to or sort of have distilled down, I'm missing some words here. The purpose that I've distilled down is that I help people get stronger so that they can achieve their full potential. That's what I do. That's why I'm here. That's my ultimate goal. That's what gets me up in the morning. And so it doesn't have to be something that's very specific, but I think Simon Sinek's resources might help you. And so I would look that up, and I'll be sure to put a link there so that you can get the values inventory and see, like, maybe there are just some things that you're not thinking of in your life, or sometimes seeing it in numbers can really help and say, yes, of course. That's sort of what the missing piece is. All right, these are great questions. Thank you all so much. Do you have any tips for overcoming choice paralysis? Not committing to anything or moving forward in life for fear of making the wrong choice? That's a really great question. And this, again, it sort of goes back to Allegra Stein and her talk. But basically, there's a couple of things. Analysis paralysis and sort of being up here in our own head is almost never going to give us the best, like, clearest, most resounding decision that sort of comes from inside of us. And I mean, like, from your gut, from your heart. If it's coming from your brain and you're getting that feeling like, oh, my brain's going to explode because I'm thinking about this so hard, and it's a really important decision, it's oftentimes not the way to get the most clear. So in her talk, Allegra, and in her talk, Allegra mentioned a couple things. The first is that, like, on some deep level, you have to know that there's just choices. Both choices are right. Right? And agonizing over which one is the right one is oftentimes going to prevent you from taking any action. A lot of the things that we choose in our lives are not permanent. We can always change our mind later. We can go back. I mean, hey, some things are permanent, even like tattoos. You can kind of get those removed in some cases. But like, there aren't so many things in our lives that are, I think we believe that things are super permanent once we make a decision down one path or another. But, you know, so that's one thing that you have to sort of come to accept, is that both choices are right. There is no wrong choice. And you're not going to know until you actually go down the path whether or not it was the best choice. Another thing she talked about was being okay with making mistakes. Right? It's interesting. And I say we, like, I've gone through this as well, where we're very forgiving of other people and their mistakes, but dang, we're hard on ourselves. And the more we're willing to let mistakes become part of our process, and I love how I've seen this pointed out, mistake is a missed take. It's a missed take. Like, you think about the movie industry when they have the little, like, cut, that's a take, right? So you had a take, it was just, you missed that opportunity, or it wasn't the right opportunity for you, come to find out. So a mistake is not necessarily failure. And even if we fail, there's always a lesson to be learned in that. So, I think those are some of the tips that she talked about. And if you caught her talk, I'm hoping you did, because it was really, really good. She is all about, at that point, taking some kind of micro action. So if you're afraid of making the wrong choice, what if you just took a very, 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 very tiny action in one direction or the other? That way, if you made a choice and it turned out not to be the right one, well, you didn't invest a lot of time or energy or money or heart or whatever you want to call it into that particular choice. So by taking a micro action, and that's breaking something down into very, very, very small steps, you can get momentum going in a particular direction, but you can always stop very easily. Because, okay, cool. So it's like the train hasn't really picked up a ton of momentum while you're taking those micro actions. And another resource you may want to look at is Byron Katie. She has a book called Loving What Is. Byron Katie gets very sort of centered on self, but she would say something like, well, how does it feel? How does it feel in your body when you're paralyzed by making the wrong choice? Does it feel good? Probably not. And so why do we continue to put ourselves in that particular situation where we're feeling that pain or we're feeling that stress in our body? I know for me, like, I feel it in here. Everybody has a different place they feel that stress in their body. And so realizing again that very few things are permanent. Usually the person with the most judgment on it about you making a mistake or not is you, and taking micro actions that can help move you forward. So I hope that helps. Audrey said, I haven't heard Pilar Garcinos talk, but I'll look into Healthy Deviance. Yeah, she's writing a book on it actually right now, but you can Google it, and she's got a little Facebook page, and she shares more on the Living Experiment podcast as well, where she co-hosts with Dallas Hartwig. Cool. So hard to know where to start. Sometimes hard to find the courage to step into the fear of the unknown. Yeah, so micro actions, Sherry, definitely where you want to go. Jill mentioned the answer is to take action even when you're terrified, and when you do, you get confidence boost. I couldn't agree more, Julie. And I love to say this to people, is like, we sit around waiting to feel a particular way so that we can then go do the thing. I'm waiting to feel confident so I can do X. I'm waiting to feel happy so I can do Y. I'm waiting to feel sexy so I can wear a swimsuit on the beach. I'm waiting to feel whatever it is. We have a million of these, right? And oftentimes, and that sort of is a very linear thing. Like, we're waiting for the feeling and then we do the thing. But what we don't often realize is that when we do the thing, we often get the feeling. It's very cool. It's a cycle. And so if I do the thing, even if I'm kind of scared, Oftentimes I'll feel confident afterwards. If I do the thing, I will often feel motivated. If I do the thing, I'll often feel happy. Wear the freaking bathing suit. I'll feel sexy or strong or whatever it is. Like, and so many times we sit around waiting for this feeling to smack us in the head so that we can go do the thing because we automatically will have some kind of permission. And that's just not how it works. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a pep talk. But, I think ultimately it's going and doing the thing anyway. And I know that feeling because very recently, last month, I went to jiu-jitsu for the first time. You want to talk about sweaty palms and being nervous and kind of scared and not knowing what was going on. But just going and surviving that day, I was like, all right, I can do this again, right? And so then it played into that feeling. So it's like you're scared, you're nervous, go in there, do the thing, and you'll oftentimes feel the way you want to feel as a result. I'm reading Mel Robbins' book, The 5-Second Rule, has stopped me overthinking and even taking micro steps. Yes, that's awesome. Good. She has a TEDx talk. Awesome. So people can go and look her up. Very cool. Yes, your mind might talk yourself out of something in a short amount of time. I'll give you a quick story and then we'll wrap this up here. But my husband and I were in New Zealand in the Auckland airport, waiting to get a flight back to LA. Now, I've mentioned Simon Sinek. He's a very influential person. I look up to him. His books are very influential. I told you I took his course on purpose. And so we were sitting in the terminal and I was eating like a chia pudding of some sort, like just so focused on my food because I was so hungry. And my husband, who's running the chat, sort of elbowed me and he's like, there's Simon Sinek. And I looked up and he's walking right at us, right toward us. And I just kind of froze. And I was like, oh my God, that's Simon. Is that Simon Sinek? That's not Simon Sinek. Is it him? So we had this back and forth. Anyway, then we sort of like low-key stalked him around the terminal just to make sure it was really him. And he came back to where we were sitting. And I wanted to go and say hi to him because he's been so influential and I look up to him and I admire him and he inspires me and the whole story. And the more I told myself that story in my head, the more I psyched myself out. And I was like, I can't go over there. I can't. What if he says, what if he does this? What if he does that? What if he does this? What if he says that? And I got paralyzed, right? Just like we're saying, I couldn't even go. I could not take a step forward. Well, luckily I had Z there and like any good husband, he took his index finger and poked me in the back and pushed me right toward Simon. I went over. I said, hi, my name is Steph. And that's all I said. And then I was like, okay, didn't die. All right. So I sort of like, shook his hand and we had a great chat. And then I ended up seeing him again in San Diego and it was fine. But the point is that the more I stood there and the more I talked to myself about going over and saying hello, the more nervous I got and the more I actually didn't want to do it. So again, it was just literally the micro action of being pushed in the back. And I had him there to do it for me. If Z wasn't there, I don't know if I would have actually gone over to say hello. The point is, sometimes you'll have somebody else in your life who's going to be that nudge, right? I kind of like imagine the mama bird nudging the baby bird closer and closer to the edge. And we have those trusted people in our lives that can do that for us. So I hope that was maybe an interesting story and the fact that it happens to everybody, even me. So the next time you're feeling nervous or scared, take a very tiny action forward. He is a very good husband. Yes. He's very amazing. He's also great at all of the support and he's been very helpful this week. So we appreciate him. All right. Well, that's been sort of the conclusion of this evening. I want to respect your time and get you on your way. It was very fun to hang out with you. I hope that you grab the link. I'll get off here the video very, very shortly and place the link to that values inventory. And I'll sort of show you what it looks like. Kind of like this, right? It's just a single page PDF that you can use. It does say harder to kill challenge on the top. So that's part of what we do in the challenge, but I'm more than happy to share that with you. This has been such an incredible week. I can't even say how much this has affected me in such a positive way. And it's been such an honor to be of service to you and bring you these expert speakers and share their knowledge with you, and hopefully give you the start that you need to go in whatever direction you want to go in. I'm just so appreciative that you're here, and it's been so fun. So we're going to get in touch in the next couple of days asking for some feedback, and just, we're not going to disappear on you. If you are an All Access Pass member, you certainly have the group, the Facebook page, all of the transcripts and the MP3s and all of the videos to go back and watch at your own leisure. If you're part of the live event, the free live event, you can still listen to day 5 and 6 and today. Tomorrow I'll be taking down day 5, so then you'll be able to listen to day 6 and 7. So you still have a chance to watch some of the videos for free if you've been following along so far. We're not going to take everything down, but if you have been considering the All Access Pass, the cart does close tonight. We're going to take a break tomorrow. We're going to take tomorrow off. So we're going to close the cart tonight at midnight Pacific time. So if you're thinking about getting the All Access Pass so that you have all of the stuff from the summit and all of the awesome bonuses, then that's going to come down at the stroke of midnight. And we're going to take tomorrow off, hopefully. So this has been so fun. Thank you all so much. I'm just seeing all the comments. You all are so amazing, and I appreciate you so very much. Have a great, wonderful evening, and we'll see you very soon. Bye.